In the spring of 2019, the Price River in Utah was drying up. The town of Helper was dying along with it. A graduate student named Emma Doden proposed a solution that sounded like a joke: release beavers into the river. The same beavers that were being shot as pests across the state. 47 animals at first. Within 8 weeks, fewer than half were still alive. But the ones that survived changed everything. The Price River is a tributary of the Colorado. It flows through the town of Helper in Utah, population 2,112. The U.S. Geological Survey photographed this river back in the 1930s. In those photographs, the channel, roughly 30 meters wide, winds between the cliffs. Today it's no wider than 6. An 80% reduction in a single human lifetime, and that's after several years of restoration. Before the project began, it was worse. The causes are several. Dams and water diversion stripped away part of the flow. Tamarisk and Russian olive, invasive plants introduced in the 19th century, took over the banks and squeezed the channel. Their roots locked in the silt, the channel stopped moving and gradually cut down into its own bed. The narrower the channel became, the faster the current ran. The faster the current, the less water remained in the ground. Drought did the rest. In some years, stretches of the neighboring San Rafael River dried out completely. For the fish, this meant one thing: nowhere to go. 3 species living in the Price are listed as species of concern in Utah: the blue headsucker, the flannelmouth sucker, and the roundtail chub. The first, when pulled from the water into sunlight, flashes gold. During spawning season, the males turn red with blue heads. Phaedra Booty, a professor of aquatic sciences at USU, describes what happened to their habitat. They look like big irrigation ditches. The rivers are simplified and degraded. Fish need complexity. Without complexity, there are no spawning grounds, no refuge from the current, no place to wait out a drought. One straight ditch carrying water is a pipe. Manual efforts to fix this had been going on for years. Federal agencies planted riparian vegetation, cleared invasive trees, installed wooden structures across the channel to slow the flow. Some held for 1 season. Some lasted until the first major flood. A person cannot patrol every meter of a river every year and rebuild what was destroyed. What was needed was someone who would do it for free, around the clock, on their own initiative. This is exactly the complexity a beaver knows how to create. A rodent weighing between 7 and 14 kilograms that fells trees with its teeth and builds dams from branches, mud, and stone. It builds a dam to deepen the water around its lodge, to avoid becoming someone's dinner. But the consequences of that construction activity for a river are enormous. A dam raises the water level. The water slows and spreads across the floodplain. A pool forms, a place where fish can shelter during a drought when the main channel runs dry. Through the root systems of riparian plants, water seeps into the ground and stays there for months after the last rain. A willow growing beside a dam casts shade. The water beneath it is cooler, and cool water holds more oxygen. Fish return to where both are present. A single beaver can hold tens of thousands of liters of water in the system that would otherwise drain into the sand. Those who designed the project had known about these effects for a long time. The idea of using beavers for river restoration had been practiced by the U.S. Forest Service as far back as the 1940s, but never at this scale. By the early 2000s, Booty's colleagues in the USU Aquatic Sciences Department, Joe Wheaton and Nick Bowes, had developed and refined the method of artificial beaver dam analogs, a framework of wooden posts and branches installed across the channel. The idea is simple: give beavers a reference point and initial shelter before they begin building their own. The materials are cheap. A volunteer can install them. If a flood takes the structure out, the debris settles downstream and forms a new obstruction. The method was called low-tech process-based restoration. Behind the name, a simple concept: don't fight the river, give it the tools to restore itself. But for any of this to work, there had to be actual beavers. In the spring of 2019, Doden launched the first systematic field experiment in relocating beavers to desert rivers of the American West. Partners included the Bureau of Land Management, the Bureau of Reclamation, Utah Division of Wildlife Resources, and the USDA. The animals for the project were the pests. Across the state, beavers were regularly coming into conflict with human infrastructure, flooding basements, chewing through irrigation pipes, blocking drainage culverts. The standard response had been lethal removal. Nate Norman, a biologist with the Beaver Ecology and Relocation Center at USU, offered an alternative: live trapping and translocation. The same animals that some people considered a problem were sent to places where they could become the solution. Spring 2019. Doden and her team began trapping beavers across the state. The logistics are more complicated than they sound. In March, the first trapped animals spent 3 days in quarantine at the USU Beaver Ecology Center. The protocol is mandatory. Beavers can carry pathogens dangerous to fish in the new water body. Then comes surgical implantation of a radio transmitter, an identification chip, and a record of weight and condition. At the same time, along the target river reaches, a crew drives the first artificial dam analogs into the riverbed, wooden frames woven with branches. The reasoning is simple. A beaver sees something resembling a dam and decides the site is already occupied. It might stay. But the main problem isn't logistics. Relocation is a very dangerous activity for a beaver, Norman explains. In a new place, the animal doesn't know where the predators are or where the safe water is. On land, it's slow. Norman puts it precisely: a walking sausage for anything that hunts. Doden released the first animals and began monitoring. The radio transmitters sent coordinates every few hours. Most signals were moving slowly along the bank. Then one went still. A few days later, another simply dropped off the map. Some transmitters simply failed, a standard technical problem in field conditions. But some animals died. Predators. Possibly drought. In September 2019, large stretches of the Price went dry, leaving beavers exposed with no cover. One animal traveled 20 kilometers downstream, well beyond any projection. He's probably still helping the system because the river is so degraded, Doden would say later in a BBC interview. 40.4% of relocated animals left their target sites. Not one of the resident beavers in the control group moved beyond its home territory. Doden completed the analysis. Overall survival of relocated beavers at 8 weeks post-release was around 40%. For residents, around 80%. Julie Young commented on the numbers in a single sentence: "That's already a better outcome. That's the 40% that didn't get a bullet." But while Doden was counting the losses, something else was happening on the river. On reaches where there had never been a single dam, dams appeared. Someone was building. Who exactly? Unknown. Possibly the same beavers assumed to be gone. Possibly new ones that had come on their own. In 2021, Doden defended her dissertation with distinction and left. The question she had opened remained unanswered. It passed to Kristen Sandbadak, along with the field equipment, the data tables, and a route to the Price. Before opening a cage over the water, the cage had to be filled. Sandbadak inherited from Doden not only a dissertation topic, but the full cycle of fieldwork. From the phone call to the moment the beaver disappears beneath the surface, weeks pass. And every one of them began the same way, with a complaint. The Utah Division of Wildlife Resources keeps a registry of conflict beavers. Any landowner whose property has been flooded by a dam, whose irrigation pipe has been chewed through, or whose drainage culvert has been blocked, can call in a report. The standard answer used to be a lethal removal permit. The new answer is a call to Norman or Sandbadak. The team would travel to the site, assess the situation, and set traps, mostly Hancock or Coro style, large live capture enclosures that trigger when the animal enters. Each trap was secured to the bank with a cable and a rebar stake. Bait: castoreum from the beaver's musk glands and fresh vegetation. Checks: every morning, before the sun had time to heat the metal walls of the cage. The season ran from spring snowmelt to the first snow of autumn. Over a season, Norman and his team trapped an average of 70 animals across the state, from a park pond in Hurricane to a golf club in St. George, from irrigation canals on the Savior River to private ranches in the north of the state. Wherever a beaver had become a problem, a live trap appeared. The most troublesome animals turned out to be young solitary males. According to Norman, these are animals that have recently left their family colony and haven't yet found their own territory. They wander, encounter human infrastructure, and start building because it's the only thing they know how to do. For this reason, Norman captured whole family groups when he could, a mated pair plus juveniles. A family group has a social anchor. A solitary beaver in an unfamiliar place often simply leaves. After capture, 3 days in the beaver bunkhouse. This is where Sandbadak ran her tests. At every handling, an aggression score from 1 to 5. On the third night, an unfamiliar object in the enclosure and a stopwatch. Some animals approached within 30 seconds. Some sat in a corner and didn't move. Sanbadak recorded everything. Then, crate on the truck bed and 6 hours through the desert, past salt flats and dry riverbeds. The animal in its metal cage was headed somewhere it would either stay or become someone's dinner. At the site, Sanbadak opened the cage over the water and watched. Some beavers hesitated on the bank for a minute or two, sniffing the air, turning their heads. Some went into the water immediately and disappeared beneath the surface. In the first days after release, they typically explored the banks, marking territory, searching for material. If they stayed, within a week or two, they began gnawing. First small branches, then willows as thick as an arm. Then a dam appeared. First a few sticks across the current, then a layer of mud, then more branches on top. The water began to rise, but that was only if they stayed. Sanbadak got in the truck and drove back. The following week, check the transmitter, see if the signal was still moving. Sanbadak came with a specific question the first phase hadn't examined. Does it matter which beaver you release? Not age, not sex, personality. The data from the quarantine tests had been accumulating all season. Now Sanbadak was looking for a pattern. Do calmer beavers survive longer? Do more aggressive ones travel farther from the release site? Our last one we just released. He was very aggressive the whole time. A big male, a little scary. He would hiss and lunge at us. Ice Baby is different. Calm, which is why Sanbadak has the most hope for her. May 25th, 2022, against the chalk slopes of the Book Cliffs in southeastern Utah, Sanbadak opens a cage over the water. She points to an artificial dam a little further upstream, a wooden frame, already partly broken up by winter flooding. There used to be more juniper here and it was a lot bigger, but they got washed out by floods, Sanbadak explains. Now in front of her is a ruined frame to work with, or to start from scratch. Ice Baby rolls down the bank, slides into the water, and disappears beneath the surface. But the ending of this chapter is ambiguous. Sanbadak's data, published in the journal Restoration Ecology in 2024, showed that artificial dam analogs did not improve survival rates of relocated beavers. Calmer animals, like Ice Baby, did survive longer. Bolder, more aggressive ones traveled farther from the release site. By the end of data collection, not one of the relocated beavers remained alive in the study area. But the dams remained, and on reaches where nothing had ever been built before, new ones appeared. By 2023, the number of dams on the Price exceeded the level recorded before the experiment began. Where the riverbed had once been straight and flat, there are now pools, riffles, and stretches of slowed current. The groundwater table along the banks has risen. Riparian willows and cottonwoods that hadn't been seen in years began returning on their own, without any planting. The bluehead sucker, flannelmouth sucker, and roundtail chub were documented again in the lower reaches, where they hadn't been seen in more than 10 years. The river became more complex. That was exactly what was needed. In early 2025, Lanice Peterman and Jordan Nilsson published a column in the Salt Lake Tribune. The recovery of the Price River helped save our town in Utah. On a warm day, you'll likely see a river filled with tourists and locals kayaking, tubing, and fishing. 10 years ago, it was hard to imagine that scene, and a thriving recreation economy was possible. The town of Helper, a former coal hub of Carbon County where businesses had been closing for years and young people had been leaving. Now, kayaks in the town center and weekend rental queues. But this is where it's important to pause. Beavers are not the only reason. In parallel, federal programs cut out tamarisk and Russian olive along the banks. Several old non-functioning dams that had been restricting natural flow were removed. Livestock grazing in the riparian zone was limited. Geologist Wally McFarlane spent years building orthophotographic maps and calculating where to place artificial dams for maximum effect. Exactly how much was done by beavers and how much by the rest of the programs has not been calculated. No one has published a current beaver count on the Price. No one has tallied the number of dams down to the individual structure. What is known for certain, the results are real. Why exactly they happened is a different question. Sanbadak's 2024 study posed an uncomfortable question. If artificial dam analogs do not improve the survival of relocated beavers, and the data say exactly that. Then what mechanism actually worked on the price? The first beavers died or left, but the dams they managed to build or maintain stayed. New animals, either through natural dispersal or subsequent waves of relocation, arrived to find infrastructure already in place. Perhaps the first 47 beavers were not restorers but pioneers, animals that paid the price so that the ones coming after them would have somewhere to go. That question remains open. The scientific community has no consensus. There is a broader problem as well. The Price River is a tributary of the Colorado. The Colorado is the system that sustains 40 million people across 7 American states. The water-sharing agreement between those states was signed in 1922, a year when the river was running particularly high. In the 100 years since, the population has grown, the climate has changed, and the river has shrunk. Beavers on the Price can hold water in the local soil, but they cannot change the physics of the climate. McFarland puts it without softening. It's almost like triage. Any fish we can save is good, because these important fish are disappearing. In August 2025, the Utah Division of Wildlife Resources reported another relocation. 3 beavers from a conflict zone in the south of the state were given new waterways. A routine operation. It is routine now. The Beaver Ecology and Relocation Center at USU has been renamed the Beaver Ecology and Relocation Collaborative, an expanded partnership network with the U.S. Forest Service, UDWR, and dozens of landowners. Norman says that attitudes among farmers and ranchers toward beavers have shifted dramatically over the past 5 years. The reason is simple: drought. A beaver pond doesn't wash out in the spring and doesn't need annual repair. The beaver fixes it itself. One rancher, once he understood this, stopped filing removal requests and started educating his neighbors. On the neighboring San Rafael River, a natural flood in 2010 blocked the main channel and forced water out onto the floodplain. Beavers returned on their own, without any relocation. By 2021, riparian habitat in that stretch had expanded by 230%. It is now the most hydrologically diverse reach on the entire river. Molly Alves, a graduate student who joined Young's lab after Sambadosh, is currently working on a policy review of beaver relocation across the American West, where it works, where it doesn't, and what can be standardized. Utah, which 5 years ago was one graduate student's experiment, is becoming the methodological foundation for other states. Colorado, Idaho, California, each with its own version of what Doden began on the Price in the spring of 2019. The question now facing not scientists, but water managers and policymakers: if 60% of relocated animals die or leave, and the results are still tangible, how many beavers does it take to hold water in the desert West under climate change? And will there ever be enough? There is no answer, but the project continues.